Tonight, a return to virtual learning.
I can't leave a kindergarten and a grade 5 home for 10 hours just so I can go to work.
It's back to online learning for thousands of kids across the province, with parents struggling and scrambling to make it all work. Plus,
we're all going to have to sort of hold our breath and try and eke our way through.
stricter measures also kicking in today, with restaurants, gyms and theaters all closing their doors. This as Ontario reports a big jump in COVID hospitalizations. And
is the fourth booster shot going to be able to combat whatever new variant is coming along?
Omicron is taking a big toll on the elderly. But while fourth doses are now available for those in long-term care homes, there are some questions and concerns. We'll take it to the experts. Good evening, I'm Kelda Yoon. It was back to online learning for students across Ontario today. After starting the year in person back in September, the surge in Omicron cases has kids once again out of the classroom. Now, parents say it's a struggle to homeschool, and as Trevor Dunn tells us, some have decided not to bother with it at all.
It does become a lot. This is very, very different.
For single dad Peter John Reganowski, day one of virtual learning went okay. Even if at home, it can be hard to keep a 4- and 10-year-old focused.
We've got pets, we've got toys. It can be distracting.
They're making do, but hoping this won't last. Reganowski is a welder and can't work from home.
I can't leave a kindergarten and a grade 5 home for 10 hours or 8 hours so I can go to work. Financially, I'm past the red mark. I'm so far in debt at this point that I don't know how I'm gonna recover. I'm just kind of holding on for dear life, and I guess it's back onto EI at this point.
As some parents head back to government assistance, the plan is for kids to be back in class in 2 weeks. But at the TDSB, there are doubts that will happen.
We're making the best of it as we can, given the difficult circumstances. Students are online this morning doing remote learning, and we hope that it's only a matter of 2 weeks of this, and then we can get back to remote learning, in-person learning, but we'll have to wait and see.
Some parents aren't even bothering this time around. They say the risk COVID-19 poses for kids is low, while the cost of school closures on their mental health and development is high. There are even calls for a parent strike of remote learning.
I'm fighting for 2 weeks because I feel like if we make a big enough move in these 2 weeks, it will snowball into an effect where people will start listening.
In a statement, Education Minister Stephen Lecce says the government knows parents and students are facing great levels of difficulty navigating through the global pandemic. He says that's why the government has extended school-based academic and mental health support to students. Trevor Dunn, CBC News, Toronto.
The province is instructing hospitals and healthcare professionals to stop all non-urgent surgeries and procedures to preserve critical care capacity and human resources. A spokesperson for the Ontario Health Ministry says the province is reinstating what it calls Directive Number 2, a temporary measure meant to preserve and increase hospital bed capacity. The province saw a sharp increase in hospitalizations today due to COVID-19, now over 2,000. Now that's a jump of nearly 800 since yesterday. Nearly 300 of those patients are in intensive care. And stricter public health measures officially kicked in today. Restaurants, theaters, gyms, and recreational facilities are now closed, while many shops and services have tighter capacity limits. Ali Chiasson has more on the restrictions and the reaction.
A lot has changed as of today. This modified stage 2 of reopening will see restrictions on how you dine, how you socialize and shop.
I guess it makes sense, honestly, if they're going to try to, contain everything and try to make sure that the hospitals don't get overwhelmed.
That's the idea. To keep hospitalizations down, the province brought back capacity limits of 50% at stores and shopping malls. 5 people can gather indoors, 10 people outdoors.
We're not stranger to it. If it's gonna keep us safe, I'm all for it.
You're not alone in feeling the deja vu.
It is like Groundhog Day, just over and over and over again.
If we have to do it, we have to do it.
Lockdowns weigh on everyone differently. And then gyms have closed completely in what would be the busiest time of the year.
That kind of mental hurdle, it's exhausting. It's a real tiring process. I am pretty darn determined to make sure that everybody is still getting a paycheck, that everybody's going to still have a role and a job to do. And we're all going to have to sort of hold our breath and try and eke our way through.
To help eke through, the federal government started taking applications for the Canada Worker Lockdown Benefit, which pays $300 a week to both employed and self-employed people who cannot work due to a COVID-19 lockdown.
Well, number one, the CWLB, it's not enough.
It's about $700 less than what the Canada Recovery Benefit offered in previous lockdowns.
We feel that the same amount of money from CRB should be kind of brought over into this new benefit. I don't see what's different.
The Full Plate is a nonprofit service industry advocacy group currently rallying people to write to their MPs.
The higher CWLBs, the lockdown benefit needs to be raised, but also to recognize, mostly just to recognize the gaps, to recognize the incongruencies and the lack of support that these workers have received.
On Monday, the provincial government announced its support for businesses. It will offer rebates for property taxes and energy costs for anyone forced to close up shop. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Meteorologist Ian Black joins us now with a first look at the forecast. And Ian, the story of the day, of course, that wind.
Well, that was certainly a blustery evening, wasn't it? Wind gusts that were close to 70 kilometers per hour, temperatures dropping. Be prepared for that combination tomorrow morning if you're heading out, colder and still blustery, not as windy as it was this evening. Still talking about a temperature roller coaster. More often than not, over the next 7 days, temperatures will be near seasonal highs to below and well below seasonal highs, okay? Weekend looks like a little bit of a split. Saturday looks okay. Sunday, probably some showers, but briefly milder. All right, here's a quick look at what's happening overnight. Look at those temperatures dropping off here. Still blustery, and with those temperatures and a lot of clouds and a stray flurry as possible, dress appropriately. That would be my advice. Some of the models are showing some of these streamers coming perilously close to the GTA. So I'm going to put in a chance of seeing some flurries. I just don't see them staying in one place for too long. That's the good news with all this. But it will be blustery, and it will be much colder than it was today. So dress appropriately, okay? In terms of your specifics, down to about -6 overnight, generally cloudy, a stray flurry, blustery. Tomorrow, still kind of breezy and a high temperature set early of -1. And then, boy, it gets much colder. Your 7-day forecast coming up.
Thanks so much, Ian. There were more long lineups for free COVID-19 rapid tests in Toronto today.
Of course, with the cases going up, I think it's best if you have like a kit at home so that you could like continuously checking yourself. I'm also in the health field as well.
We came here because we need another stash because we use it all. I have 4 kids and we have to use it.
The province is continuing to hold pop-ups to give the kits away. Today, they were distributed at U of T's Scarborough campus, where cold, damp weather didn't stop the crowds from waiting outside for a test. There's another pop-up being held tomorrow, this time at U of T's Mississauga campus. Today, the Prime Minister announced 140 million rapid tests will be delivered to provinces and territories this month. That's quadruple the amount delivered in December. The latest data out of long-term care homes in Ontario shows a 17% increase in staff infections in just one day. Now, 1,027 long-term care staff are currently listed as COVID positive. That's up from 874 yesterday. 145 long-term care homes are currently in outbreak, up 10 from yesterday. The province deems it an outbreak if a home has at least one lab-confirmed case of COVID-19 in either a resident or staff. Today, the leader of the Ontario Liberal Party called on the province to bring in the military to help long-term care homes and hospitals.
We saw over the last few days that our next door neighbors in Quebec reached out and asked for military help with the vaccine rollout, and they received it. I don't want Doug Ford to wait another week or 2 or 5. I don't want them to be scrambling at the last second. I want that conversation to occur today.
The Canadian Armed Forces were deployed to 7 hard-hit homes in Ontario at the beginning of the pandemic in April 2020. In light of the Omicron variant, the government has tightened restrictions at homes, including pausing general visits and suspending day trips for residents for social purposes. Once again, as we just saw, the surge in COVID cases is taking a particularly big toll on seniors and the elderly, with a significant rise in hospitalizations since the new year. Now, 4th doses are now available to those in long-term care homes, but there are questions about just how effective this extra booster would be. Our Dahlia Ashry has a look.
Caroline Goodenough lives with her husband George in Peterborough. The 71-year-old is paralyzed from the neck down.
He unfortunately only has 38% of his lung capacity, so we have to be incredibly vigilant as to who he comes in contact with.
Goodenough lives in a household of 3 generations. It includes her son and her parents, both in their 80s. Her mom is a type 1 diabetic. Goodenough, her husband, and parents have all received their boosters.
You take care of yourselves, you should be able to take care of your families.
Omicron cases in people aged 60 and up have skyrocketed since the new year. Already, the province has reported nearly 1,600 confirmed cases and over 300 cases in those 80 and above. Geriatrician Dr. Samir Sinha says only a little more than 50% of the population over 60 have received their 3rd shot so far. And that's a cause for concern.
We know that without that extra protection and with that risk of waning immunity, we know that there's a higher risk that older adults are more likely, when they get infected, to actually end up in hospitals.
The vaccines were developed based on the original strain of the coronavirus.
Why are people being suggested to take booster shots if there is no even Omicron strain in this?
The study that we did in Ontario suggested it was about 37% protection.
Dr. Jeff Kwong says even as it weans off, boosters still provides enough antibodies to help avoid hospitalizations or death. But with a study showing only 30% protection, Goodenough questions whether she and her family should get the 4th shot.
Is the 4th booster shot going to be able to combat whatever new variant is coming along?
Kwong says it depends who is getting it. The province announced last week it is making a 4th dose available to long-term care residents.
I'm not sure that a 4th dose is really going to help that much unless you're like really kind of very vulnerable. So for instance, the long-term care residents who are very vulnerable and their immune systems don't work so well, maybe giving them a boost would make sense.
Meanwhile, Goodenough says her family will continue being as careful as possible.
Up until now, we have taken care of ourselves. We have, for the most part, isolated ourselves, wearing the masks or double masking to protect ourselves.
Dahlia Ashry, CBC News, Toronto.
To some other news now, Toronto police are requesting a $1.1 billion budget for 2022. That's an increase of nearly $25 million from last year. The city's police chief calls it a modest additional investment to maintain services. But after more than a year of calls to defund the police, some, unsurprisingly, disagree. Talia Ricci has reaction.
They were calls that were echoed across the city and North America. More than a year and a half later, Toronto police are requesting a 2.3% budget increase of almost $25 million. Police Chief James Raymer noting this comes after the force asked for a 0% increase in 2021 and reduced its staff by more than 400 since 2010.
It's no secret that there is a lack of trust, especially when it comes to marginalized communities and the police.
Toronto police say the request is necessary to maintain services in a city that's growing in population and continues to see a rise in homicides and gun violence. But those working with youth and marginalized groups say the money is better spent building communities.
If there was additional funding that could be provided for grassroots organizations to be able to really fulfill this work and be able to move forward and provide the supports that we're hearing are needed from our communities, we'd be able to make much more of an impact.
Toronto police say the budget increase will help with matters such as growing the neighborhood community officer program, supporting Vision Zero, and expanding the number of officers who receive enhanced mental health training. Noting in response to requests for transparency, a line-by-line breakdown is available online. This professor says it's more detailed than what was provided in the past.
But as yet, we still don't actually know in a specific or a precise manner how those funds are being spent. So how much of officer time, for example, is dedicated to responding to calls for service? How much of officer time is dedicated to community policing?
The Toronto Police Services Board will consider the proposed budget next week. The city's budget will go to City Council for final approval in February. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
Welcome back. University athletes across Ontario can't train, practice, or compete indoors for the next 3 weeks. Now that's because they're not considered elite amateurs under the most recent round of COVID-19 restrictions. And a group of student athletes at Ryerson University wants to change that. Ryan Patrick Jones has their story.
On a normal weekday, this court at the Mattamy Athletic Center would be bustling with activity. Ryerson University's basketball, volleyball, and other major sports teams practice and play here. But the gym will be silent and empty until at least the end of January.
When I first found out, like a lot of my teammates and coaches were frustrated hearing the news and a little saddened about the uncertainty of what this is going to look like for the rest of our season.
Under restrictions that took effect today, all indoor sports facilities must close for 3 weeks. Exceptions include places where Olympic and Paralympic athletes train and professional and elite amateur leagues. These 7 elite amateur leagues are allowed to continue. Ontario University Athletics, which represents 9,000 athletes playing 23 sports, is not on the list. And that's a glaring omission, according to the captain of the Ryerson men's volleyball team.
There are also a lot of athletes who are participating in world competitions. We have Olympic athletes who have participated in the Tokyo 2020 Olympics this year.
The first part of the OUA season in the fall took place without any COVID outbreaks. Now that the second half hangs in the balance, Rabbit and Dodig teamed up with other Ryerson athletes to release this statement. In it, they asked the government to recognize OUA athletes as elite amateurs so they can continue to train during the lockdown.
The opportunity to not be able to train and do the thing that we love and come here to do every day has a big toll on us for growing our level, or growing as an athlete and as a student athlete and elite athlete that we are.
The OUA has the same message for the Ontario government.
If you know the organizations that are involved, it's really somewhat random who has gotten that status, and we couldn't figure that out. We never did really get an answer as to why we wouldn't have qualified.
A spokesperson for Premier Doug Ford said the decision to shut down university athletics was based on advice from the Chief Medical Officer of Health, adding it's necessary to blunt transmission of the Omicron variant of COVID-19. Now, athletes are left hoping they can salvage the rest of the season. Ryan Patrick Jones, CBC News, Toronto.
You're looking at a live shot of the Toronto skyline, cloudy with a few clear breaks this evening and a few flurries developing overnight as temperatures continue to dip. Currently -2 in the city, but feeling more like -10. Let's go back to Ian now with a look at your extended forecast. And Ian, those winds still going strong, but they will be calming down a bit by tomorrow.
Well, it's a hang on to your hats kind of an evening, isn't it? Takeaway here. Still blustery tomorrow, not as windy as it was this evening, and much colder tomorrow, so you have to dress appropriately. I mean, you know, that combination of cold and wind, never pleasant, especially downtown with those buildings and the wind tunnel effect. So here's the picture setting up for us. Certainly windy conditions here, and fronts have been going through, and all that means is, we're tapping into colder air. So despite the fact that we'll be close to seasonal high temperatures tomorrow, with the wind, it's not going to feel that great. Systems tend to follow the jet stream, so I see that one swinging around from out west coming in here for perhaps Sunday with some showers, briefly milder. But I'm telling you right now, it's right back into the deep freeze next week. Okay, so you can't rule out flurries around tomorrow. I just don't see them staying put. They kind of move around, so that's good news in terms of one place getting a lot of accumulation. breezy, cool. You start the day on Friday with a lot of clouds, perhaps some sunny breaks in the afternoon, still kind of breezy. In terms of wind gusts, yeah, there have been already gusts that have been pretty close to 70 kilometers per hour. Still breezy tomorrow, but not as bad as it is this evening. But with the temperatures so cool, you're going to really feel it, so dress appropriately. But typically, that's a fairly seasonal high temperature. Much colder on Friday, still breezy, possibility of flurries continue. I don't mind Saturday. Cool start, yes, normal low would be -10. Seasonally cool in the afternoon with a mix of sun and cloud. That's the split, because it looks like showers on Sunday, but 4 degrees, briefly warmer, but look what happens after that. Those temperatures just drop off in a free fall. That could be the coldest days so far this season. Well, we can't really leave with bad cold news like that. So let's cheer everyone up with this beautiful smiling snowy owl that Mary sent in. Kind of checking out the photographer there, doesn't it look? Oh, aren't those beautiful birds? Great camouflage, they fit right into the snow. Beautiful stuff, sitting on a fence post. The snowy owl lives in cold, snowy climes. That's your weather.
Finally tonight, Venice is about to become a very exclusive tourist destination. The famous city of canals is going to start charging an admission fee. The city is trying to limit the number of day tourists and encourage longer stays. As many as 80,000 tourists a day have been visiting the city, causing congestion on the streets and in the canals. So-called over-tourism has been seen as a problem in Venice for many years. Admission will be about €5, that's about $7 Canadian, for a one-day pass. Visitors will have to book in advance. Residents, their families, and people staying in local hotels will be exempt. And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. Chris Glover has your next local newscast tomorrow at 6, and I will see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Have a great night, everyone.